actually my very first presentation of the new year. So thank you again for being here. So today, what we're going to be talking about is stress. We're going to look at what stress is. We're also going to talk about the things that stress does to our body. After that, we're going to talk about the ABCs of stress management, and then I'm going to share some simple strategies for you to try at home. Sound good? All right. I also want you to remember that during this session, I want you to take ownership of your learning. So what does that mean? It means ask questions if you have questions. Use the chat and video function like I mentioned. If you need an example, just type one into the chat box or unmute yourself. And also remember to take care of yourself during this presentation. So if you need to step away, if you need to grab a coffee, take a stretch, do whatever it is that you need to do. So let's take a look at what stress is. And I really would love for you to unmute yourselves right now. I'm going to give you a definition, but if I can ask you to share, what does stress mean for you? What does stress do to you?
Shoulders up around my ears.
Shoulders up around your ears. Okay, so you're talking about this.
Yep.
Yes.
Physical
okay.
stress.
Physical stress. All right, definitely. What else?
Feeling overwhelmed.
Sorry, Josie?
Feeling overwhelmed.
Feeling overwhelmed, absolutely.
For me, it's rapid heartbeat.
Rapid heartbeat, so maybe even chest pain sometimes?
Yeah, definitely right now.
Okay. What else?
For me, it's clenched knuckles, I guess, or clenched fists.
Okay, so some more tension. Thank you. And I think one more person was going to say something.
I was going to say something. It makes, oh, sorry, Edith. We're talking over each other. I'll let you go, Edith.
Okay, so Edith and then Mary. All right, so Mary, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, for me, I lash out, right? Like I get angry almost because I lose control, I guess. So yeah.
Okay, and Edith, did you want to add? All right, I'm going to ask you to mute yourselves again.
Get up.
Edith, if you can mute yourself, that would be great.
Sorry.
All right, thank you.
Tammy, just one thing. I think also stress affects you mentally, meaning you're not thinking straight when you're under stress. You're not thinking, you know, your thoughts become kind of fragmented under stress.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're 100% correct. So if we take a look at my slide here, stress affects both your body and your mind. So not only are you not thinking properly or normally, for lack of a better word, it also affects your body and the way that you feel. So like you mentioned, racing heart, maybe headaches, backache, being irritable. It also is a response. And this is what we have to remind ourselves. And I think if we remind ourselves this when it's happening, we can take a step back. Stress is a response to either a real or perceived threat. So what do I mean by that? A real threat could be a barking dog chasing us. A perceived threat could be a comment that is made by somebody else that bothers us, that festers inside our bodies. Okay? Has anyone here heard of fight, flight, or freeze? Just by a show of hands. Okay. So essentially, the way that I like to describe it is our body is built to deal and manage with stress. And most of us don't even realize this, that when stress comes our way, our body instinctively knows either I'm going to fight, which means I'm going to battle it out with words, Sometimes people do it physically. I'm not suggesting that we do that. Sometimes people flight, where they take off or avoid. And sometimes actually that could be a good thing. And sometimes we freeze. And I think this is my most annoying response for me, when I freeze, when I don't know what to say. But there are things in our life that actually trigger us to do either one of these three. It really depends on the situation. I also want you to keep in mind that stress can also be a good thing, right? There are good things that are in our life that can be stressful, right? Like maybe getting married, getting into a new relationship, starting a new job or a new venture. I can tell you right now, for the past 3 weeks, I've been feeling anxious in the evening because I've been putting my head down on my pillow and I'm thinking about all of these great things that I want to do. So I am experiencing stress. I am getting anxious, but it's because I have started my new venture and I'm happy about it. So I have to practice the strategies that I'm going to share with you myself. We also need to remember that prolonged stress, so stress that is continuing on, so maybe a move, a divorce or a breakup, these things don't necessarily go away really quickly. These things can actually cause or overstimulate our body psychologically, so mentally and emotionally and physically. So we have to keep that in mind. Also, I want you to keep in mind that our reactions are to the situation, not about the actual situation. How does the situation make us feel? All right, so some of the things that are common stressors, and I'm actually going to ask you to join in here. I put some things up on the slide. What are some common stressors in your life?
Work demands.
Work demands, okay. Meeting deadlines, sure. What else?
Employment, self-employment.
Self-employment. I'm going to add to that unemployment.
Yeah.
What else?
For me, it's managing the household
Okay.
by myself without any help.
Okay. So you're managing the household on your own. All right. What else?
Tammy, I find that if there's things going on in my life, I feel like I have a bit of control sometimes. It's when I worry about others, about my family, and not being able to help them or to do the things that will make them, happier.
Okay. So you're worrying about things that you can't control. Yeah, this is very common. Anyone else?
My kids being jealous of each other.
Oh, wow. So being stressed out about that. Yeah, I can see that happening for sure. I have 4 kids myself, so I know how that goes. If we take a look at this slide, we have major life events, things like moving, changing jobs, unemployment. There's also long-standing stressors like parenting, right? I always joke, and I've heard this said by many people, parenting doesn't come with a manual, right? We're kind of learning as we go. Finances can also be an issue. Again, if we take a look at unemployment, if we take a look at losing a job, finances can be a really big stressor in our life. But I also want you to think about the daily annoyances that we do or that we deal with, right? Like traffic or running late or maybe even someone irritating us. These can be daily stressors, right? If we think about our workplace, we're not always going to work with people that we enjoy, okay? I'm going to be very frank there. And one thing that I've actually learned is that we're not always going to like everybody. And in the same token, not everybody's going to like or enjoy us. So I think accepting that is a big step forward. Yes, we have to learn to work with them and manage our feelings around them, but we don't necessarily have to be best friends, right? When we take a look at some more stressors, relationships, we could be married, we could be divorced, we could be breaking up as we speak, relationships with our friends, with our families. All of these types of relationships can cause stressors in our life. Would everyone agree? Thumbs up, yeah. Is there anything else that I've maybe missed? All right. So moving on, these are some of the most common physical and emotional effects that stress can have on our body. Now, I will tell you this list is non-exhaustive. It can go on and on and on because we are human beings. We all experience stress. Stress is going to come and go throughout our life, no matter what our age is. And we all experience stress differently. All right. So sometimes we're noticing, and I just realized an error in my slide. I'm going to have to change that. Change in appetite, right? So sometimes we're eating more, sometimes we're eating less. And because of this, especially if it's prolonged stress, we might notice us losing weight or gaining weight. Oftentimes, probably the number one thing that I hear is this change in sleep. Not being able to fall asleep, not being able to stay asleep. Something that I have been experiencing, I don't know about anybody else in this group, but in going to my dentist, I have realized that I'm grinding my teeth. I'm clenching my jaw. And last year, I actually had to have a root canal because I cracked one of my teeth. And I had this conversation with my dentist, and he was saying that since the pandemic, he has noticed more and more people coming to the dentist who are grinding their teeth, clenching their jaws. And so we had this conversation last year. And ironically, a few weeks ago on the news, they actually had a dentist on, and he was talking about the increase in patients coming in with bad teeth because of the stress. So there's that correlation, right, with your mind and your body. So someone here mentioned irritability, anger. Someone also mentioned a racing heart. But stress can also make us feel exhausted, tired, worn out. Sometimes we are frustrated, feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes we isolate or avoid certain situations. And again, I'm going to actually talk about avoidance because sometimes it's something that we need to do to keep us mentally well. Oftentimes we overreact. I know that myself with my children, overreaction has happened, way too many times for my liking. And, I try and learn, and I really like to think that I'm getting better over time with the overreaction by using some of these strategies. Sometimes we have difficulty focusing on a task. And honestly, I will say this right now before we even get into the strategies. If you feel like you are having difficulty focusing while you are at work, while you're in the middle of doing any sort of work that involves focusing, I'm going to suggest that you walk away, right? Get up from your desk, get some fresh air, have a coffee, have a tea, do something different, even if it's for only 10 minutes, and then go back to your task. It makes a huge difference. It also affects things like our stomach, our gastrointestinal system. So sometimes people are feeling nausea, going to the bathroom more because of the stress. High blood pressure, heart attacks even can happen because of stress and that prolonged chronic stress. Is there anything that I've missed? All right. So I'm going to talk about some tips. I call them the ABCs of surviving stress. We're going to talk about altering, accepting, and avoiding stress. We're also going to talk about building resiliency. And we're going to be talking about change. And honestly, these are some of my favorite strategies, and I try and use them on a regular basis. I will say, though, that I forget. I'm a human being. I do forget to, use these strategies. So it's really good for me as a human being and as a parent and a person that is working to go back to these strategies and remind myself to do some of these things. So when we're looking at altering stressors in our life, a couple of things here. So the first thing I have is talking it out, right? And what do I mean by that is actually calling up a friend, someone who's maybe removed from the actual situation so that you can vent. And I'm going to say on the opposite end, when your friend, when your coworker, when your kid comes to you with a problem, don't always feel like you have to solve their problem. Sometimes people are calling or approaching you because all they want to do is vent and get things off their chest. And I will say that 10 out of 10 times when I speak to a friend or a coworker about what I'm feeling, I usually immediately feel better just because of the fact that I vented. So talking it out, I think, is super important. Managing your time is also another way that we can alter our stressor. So if we think about work life, if we think about home life, I'm literally talking about scheduling your time. Scheduling time to get work done, scheduling time for lunch, scheduling time for breaks, and sticking to that schedule. Something that I do in my calendar is I also schedule in time for myself. So on Friday, I blocked time to go and get a manicure. I got a gift certificate and I am going to do that. So I made sure that in my schedule between 12 and 1, that is me time. All right. I also want you to consider rescheduling things. Has anyone ever opened up their schedule for the next few days and realized it is jam-packed from the morning to your end time, whatever your end time is, right? I see some smiles happening. I'm gonna ask for you to try and reschedule. Take a look at your schedule. See if there's anything there that can be pushed to tomorrow or Friday or next week. Getting organized also can help us with stress. And when I talk about getting organized, it literally could be anything. It could be your drawers. It could be your closet. For me, my workspace has to be organized because I feel like I'm on top of things. And I will say that there is something to be said about organizing a space in our house. It makes us feel good. We know where things are. We know where to go to when we need something. Asking for help or an opinion, I definitely talked about that when I mentioned talking to a friend or a colleague. But I also want us to remember that sometimes we're so stressed or annoyed or angry about a situation, we don't see maybe the simple things right in front of us. And if I can give you an example that I always refer to is when my son Adrian was younger. He's 17 now, but when he was about like 8, 9-ish years old, you know, he would, in wintertime would come around, he would have a jacket, hat, gloves, but he never would wear his hat. So as mom who would drop him off and knowing that at recess, they're outside, I would stress about him wearing his hat. And stubborn guy would not wear a hat. And eventually I got it out of him. He didn't like wearing a hat because it would mess up his hair. And I'm like, oh my goodness, really? So I honestly, I didn't think about it. So one day I walked into the office. This is pre-COVID, of course. And I was so frustrated. So I decided to talk to a few of the ladies in the office. And after I shared my frustration, one of the women said, well, have you ever considered putting a comb or a brush in his bag? And I'm like, no, actually I didn't. So that is what I did. I asked Adrian, do you want me to put a comb in your hair so you can fix your hair when you get to school? And he thought that was brilliant. And so he started wearing a hat. And that only came from me talking it out and asking for other people's help when I felt I needed it. Right? There's also the other side of the coin. When we offer help and people haven't asked, that could come across as annoying as well. So, you know, it's about weighing things out. And the last thing on here is simplifying. Simplifying what we do, simplifying our relationships, simplifying our schedule, keeping things Simple. Any questions or comments before we move on?
Tammy, when you mentioned the idea of asking for help or asking somebody for their opinion, it definitely can help you, but I think it also can help solidify the relationship, because the person on the other end is like, wow, they respect my opinion.
Yeah.
And they think I am, that person that they can come to, and that really helps them too. So it's a nice sort of give and take. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's absolutely correct, for sure. So the next strategies I want to talk about is avoiding. Now, I think we've been taught that avoiding situations is a bad thing. I remember when I first got married, long time ago, people would say to me, never go to sleep angry. And so I would always, dig my heels in and insist that we dealt with something right here, right now. And I was in my 20s when I got married. Well, guess what? I have learned over time that doesn't always happen. And you don't always have to solve things before you go to bed. And that's in relation to everything, I think. Sometimes we need to sleep on it and come back to it when we have a clearer head. Maybe it's not sleeping on it. Maybe it's walking on it. Maybe it's taking a break. Maybe it's, let's come back in a couple of days. This is avoiding the stressor in a good way. All right. Saying no is a strategy that I want you to try and use. I had a really difficult time with this in my 20s, maybe even in my 30s, but now I am very comfortable saying no. And no doesn't have to be rude. No could be, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that right now. I'm sorry, I can't give your kid a ride to school because I'm running late myself, right? Saying no is an opportunity to give more to ourselves, because oftentimes we say yes, 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 and again, and then we are the one that's experiencing this stress. Does that sound right to a lot of people? Have you ever put yourself in a situation where you're saying yes to everybody?
No. In the younger days, but certainly not now.
Okay, so you're learning that.
Yourself, and I find most women have to teach themselves that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we jump into the rescue, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're nurturers. We want to help. We always trying a solution, and sometimes you simply can't be that, right?
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that about women, because that actually just made me think. Me and my husband, we're very different, and we actually argue about that sometimes. I'm like, all you say to the kids is no. He knows how to say no every time.
No, men are better. It's proven. It's been studied, proven that men are better at saying no than women are.
Yeah.
And women have to teach themselves that. And I'm a testament that I did have to teach myself that and get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But now
absolutely.
it is. And one of the things I'll just to show an example of me, I'm an empath, so everything that happens I feel. And one of the things I started to realize is that being constantly bombarded by media was a negative in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was giving me stress, right? And especially those TVs like they have in doctors' offices or these places, and everything on it was negative.
Mm-hmm.
So I took media out of my life.
Yep.
I shut down cable. I just thing, and I was, and it goes into what you said about simplify. I found that my life was better for it. I was better for it. And so I've never had any regrets for over 10 years or more with no media.
That's great.
Right?
Thank
so
you for
it's
sharing.
just an example of when you being like really paying close attention to how you react to certain things and figuring out what needs to do and having the ability to make a decision to avoid it is not a bad thing.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next strategy here, removing ourselves. So what I mean by this is walking away. I can tell you that having children, having a blended family myself, I really struggled with walking away, especially when you're head to head with your kids, because I felt that I'm the parent and they should listen, and I don't get it. But you know what? In speaking with my therapist, that is one of the best things that I've learned. walking away, leaving the house when things are getting heated, because nobody wins when you have two people who are screaming, yelling, irritating each other. Obviously, you can't walk away all the time. If you get an offender bender, for example, you're going to have to stay at the scene, right? But sometimes you can walk away. Focusing on priorities is one of my favorite things to do. So for me, don't laugh, I'm a sticky notes kind of person. And I like to prioritize what I'm going to get done. For anyone who does not journal or write, I want you to try and do this when you wake up in the morning, or I even like to do this before I go to bed. It helps me sleep. I write down the things that I must get done that day. I write them down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And as I complete these tasks, I scratch them off the list and I feel elated, I feel happy. And there actually have been studies done that around note-taking and tasks, writing them down and scratching them off, that when you actually scratch something off your list, the chemicals in our brain, they light up with happiness. So focusing on priorities, I think, and I feel that this, just writing things down on paper or typing them up, whatever you like, you can put them up on a whiteboard, do whatever you feel works for you, but writing them down and checking them off when you're done can help us stay focused. Knowing your limits is also a strategy. So if we know that we cannot, for whatever reason, do A, B, and C, understand, appreciate that instead of maybe feeling guilty and saying yes. Talking about things later is another strategy. So like I said, if we're walking away from an argument, if we are walking away from butting heads with someone, this idea of giving each other space to breathe and coming back at a later time, maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's in an hour, coming back later to talk about it, you'll have a clearer mind and hopefully you can get through that situation a little bit better. Also remember that our emotions are contagious. So when we are angry, when we are frustrated, the people in front of us, whether that be parents, whether that be children, spouses, friends, they can feel our energy. So if we are heightened, then the chances are that they are going to take on that frustration, that anger as well. Okay, this one here has got to be something that I'm going to say struggled with. And I actually have this saying in my home. Probably about 15 years ago, I started working for a place called Hope Place Centers, and they're a treatment center for people who live with addictions. And they had this saying, this quote up everywhere. And if you read it over and over again, it makes so much sense. Essentially, it's the idea of accepting things for what they are. We cannot change people's behaviors. We cannot change people's reactions. We cannot change what people do and say, but we can change how we respond and how we react to a certain situation, right? If we take a look at this, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, which we can't. Grant me the courage to change the things I can, but also the wisdom to know the difference. Right? Because if there's something that I cannot change, then I need to take a step back and maybe change the way that I'm reacting or responding to a situation. Now, when we go to building resilience, I'm sure you've heard this word time and time again. Resilience is this idea of bouncing back. I don't want you to think that bouncing back is always easy. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it's going to take time depending on the stressor and the situation in your life. If me, myself, I have gone through a divorce 11 years ago, and it was very tough. And it took me a while to bounce back. But sometimes we get into maybe an argument with someone, and we're bouncing back a lot quicker because we're practicing these strategies, right? So it really depends on what we're experiencing, how we're experiencing it, who we're dealing with. But some strategies to help us, when I talk about building resiliency, is looking at things we can do for ourselves. So if we can imagine ourselves as a vehicle, we need to put gas into the vehicle, maybe not Steve's car because Steve has a Tesla, but we need to put gas in the car for it to go. And if there's no gas, we are going to be left at the side of the road, right? So we need to look at things like eating well, exercising. And when I talk about exercise, I'm not suggesting you have to go to the gym. Getting out of the house, if you have stairs, walking up and down those stairs to get our heart beating. There is studies that show working out can have the same effect as an antidepressant. So getting our heart rate going, making time for ourselves, finding things that we enjoy doing, remembering to take things one day at a time, because oftentimes, like someone mentioned earlier, we're worrying about things that are way ahead of our time. And oftentimes, these things don't even happen. That's what we need to remind ourselves. Using our support system, and oftentimes people mention to me in all of the workshops that I've had, spirituality, however that looks for you. Taking the time to pray, have faith, speak to people who maybe attend your church, etc. This one here is super important, and it's actually changed my life. So when I went through my divorce, I started seeing a cognitive behavioral therapist, CBT, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And we really worked on changing the way that I thought, because my negative thought patterns really interrupted and disrupted my life and how I dealt with situations. So I want you to ask yourself, have you ever catastrophized a situation? And what I mean by that is maybe something happened, like you got a speeding ticket. And catastrophizing would look like saying something like, oh my goodness, I got a speeding ticket. My life is over. That is an example of catastrophizing. Have you ever overgeneralized? And what overgeneralized looks like is getting into an argument with someone and saying or making statements like, you always, or you never. I'm going to guess we've all done that. Do you or have you ever jumped to conclusions? You get an email from your manager, and the first thing you think of is, ooh, what did I do? Am I going to get fired? I'll tell you right now, oftentimes when we jump to conclusions, they are negative conclusions. And those negative conclusions can sit with us all day and literally make us sick. Have you ever personalized things? So made things about you. Perfect example, you're walking in a hallway, not lately, but before COVID, you're walking in a hallway, a coworker passes you by, but they don't say hello. So all day you're thinking, Jill never said hi to me. I wonder what I did wrong. What did I do to her? That's personalizing things. And then blaming other people for maybe things that you have participated in. These are some examples of negative thinking distortions. And the idea behind CBT is if we change the way we think, it can change the way we feel. And if we change the way we feel, it's going to change the way that we act or react to situations. Now, I can do an entire session on CBT and what it is, but essentially, when you go to practice CBT, now you can see a therapist like I did, but you can also take workshops and courses that can teach you some simple CBT strategies. And the idea behind CBT is that it helps you become aware of literally inaccurate or negative thinking so that you can clearly respond in a more effective way, right? So when I gave you the example of Jill in the hallway and me thinking, well, what did I do to her? What CBT has taught me is, instead of thinking that, I take a step back and think, oh, Jill must have been busy. She maybe didn't see me and she'll call me later. Or maybe I'm going to send her a text and say, hey, I saw you this morning. Everything okay? So reframing the way you think, changing the way you think is definitely going to change absolutely everything, especially when you continue to practice it. Any questions or thoughts here? Has anyone here?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just think of the quote a friend of mine uses that as her signature line in her emails, and it says, "We can't stop the waves, but we can learn to surf." And I thought that was an interesting little quote because it kind of summarizes a little bit of what you've been saying there.
Yeah. Can I ask, on a personal level, has anyone here experienced any of those negative thinking examples? You can raise your hand, thumbs up. Yeah. It's definitely something that we have.
I certainly have. I'm really bad at saying you always do this, especially to my husband.
Yeah, and you know what happens, and I have said it too, what happens when we do that, we get people's back up against the wall, right? And it's really, if you think about it, they don't always do it. They may have done it a couple of times, but we're overgeneralizing, and then the person can get offended, right? Because this is not what their intention was. And then you start an argument, essentially. Yeah. I also want us to remember our body language. So I'm big on body language, meaning I talk with my hands, I talk with facial expressions, and I'm all over the place. And I have to be really mindful of my body language when I talk. I'd say for the most part, it's a very good thing. But if we take a look at this image here, 35%, or no, that's 55%. When we have a conversation comes across through body language. So people are watching, are feeling our energy, the way that we move our body, the things that we say with our eyes, with our smile, with our face, right? So just keep in mind our body language when we are having conversations, when we are in a difficult or frustrating situation, asking for clarification, which is something that I need to do more with my children. Usually I just jump in and assume that I need to fix things. I need to take a step back and ask more questions. Also, when someone is sharing with you, whatever it is, show interest, right? And what I mean by that is get off your phone, right? Don't be looking here, looking there, looking at your phone. Be involved. Validating someone while they're sharing also is a wonderful thing to do. And what I mean by validating is just letting them know that you're there, that you're listening, that you can appreciate what you're saying. You don't necessarily have to have been in their shoes, but you're listening and you're there. And something that I've had to work on in my entire life, because I love to talk, is not interrupting people. You know, I get so excited when people are sharing something and I'm like, oh, I got something that's like so similar. And we tend to interrupt people in the middle. And so I'm really trying hard to take a step back, let them finish their sentence before I jump in. I think this is something that we can all learn to do. All right, so moving one step ahead, a couple of things I want to remind us are things like recognizing our warning signs. So we know our bodies. We know when we're stressed. We know when we're frustrated. So when we can feel these things coming on, I want you to think about the strategies that I just taught you. Maybe it's avoiding, maybe it's having a conversation, maybe it's exercising. Deal with or manage with some of the strategies when you're recognizing your warning signs so that you can come back when you're in a better place. When we're talking about healthy coping strategies, I'm referring to negative coping strategies, because sometimes we're doing things that can impact us in a negative way. This might be, gaming more, or drinking more, or smoking more, or drinking more coffee. These are all things that can be negative coping strategies because we are doing more of them and less of the other things. I want you to remember eating well. I always mention breathing and meditation. There are tons of stuff that you can find online or through apps. One of my favorite things here is reflecting on situations. We're never going to learn unless we reflect on things that have happened. And looking in the mirror, it really does take a big person to say, you know what, I messed up. I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. And it takes an even bigger person to apologize, right? And every time we do this, especially within our families, we're leading by example. When I apologize to my children, I am showing them that they can apologize when they're in the wrong. And I have to tell you, there's days where I feel like the worst mother ever. But when one of my kids apologizes for something that they have done, I feel like, I deserve an award, because, they're catching on, right? They're catching on. They've acknowledged something and they're apologizing. All right, I'm going to say, aside from everything else that I've mentioned, practicing me time is number one. So as a coworker, as a parent, as a friend, oftentimes we put everybody else first and we're last on the list. And I'm going to suggest you put yourself on the list first. I think we've also been taught that that's selfish, right? And I want you to really get that out of your head. If you're no good for you, then I'm going to tell you, you're no good for anybody else, especially our relationships, whatever those relationships look like, especially when we're working. If you're not looking after yourself and you're putting in 60 hours a week, I will bet money that you will be more irritable with your coworkers. You'll be more snappy. You're going to make way more mistakes. These things are going to start happening because you're not scheduling time for yourself. So what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, what do I enjoy doing? Because I can sit here and tell you, hey, why don't you practice yoga? I personally don't like yoga. It looks good. Every time I try it, it's so boring for me. So what I like, instead of yoga, I like to go outside and walk. I love to see dogs walking. I like the fresh air, makes me feel good. So ask yourself, what do you enjoy, right? Think about hobbies, think about sports or activities. Also, me time means asking for help when you need it. Someone mentioned managing a home on your own. I'm going to suggest that if you have children in the home, that you get them to help with the chores. Doesn't matter how young they are, they can start doing little things. When my kids turned 13, all of them, as soon as they turn 13, I have taught them how to do laundry. So I don't do anybody's laundry in this house anymore. They do their own. Now, do I have to every week say, hey, your laundry basket is full and it stinks? Go get your laundry done? Yes, I do. But at least they're doing their own laundry. I have 2 kids that I don't need to say anything to. And then I have 2 boys that they will wear the same clothes and underwear probably, and their basket is full. So I guess what I'm trying to say is try and get whoever it is that you're living with to share the chores. And if you are living on your own, I want you to take a look at what you do and maybe shift the chores that you're doing. Maybe you don't have to do laundry 3 times a week. Maybe you're just doing it on Sundays. Maybe your dishes in the sink are going to stay here tonight and you'll get to them tomorrow, right? Because when we are living alone, we have to do everything. And I have lived alone a long time ago now, but I have lived alone and it can be overwhelming. So we do have to give ourselves, I'm going to say, some love, some acceptance, and just appreciate that not everything's going to get done today. So scheduling, I talked about. I love this saying that good enough is good enough. Sometimes we have to have that mindset. I did the best that I can with the tools that I have, and I'm letting it go, right? I do that with my presentations sometimes. So I was revamping this presentation 2 days ago, but then I was feeling tired. And, you know, this idea of having it just so gets in your head. Well, guess what? I had to walk away, shut it down, and go back another day. And when I went back the next day or day after, actually it came to life even better, right? Considering no tech time, in my opinion, is a strategy for me time. So oftentimes what we are doing is when we have alone time, we're going on technology. I'm going to suggest the opposite. I'm also going to suggest to schedule days throughout every day where your phone, where your TV, where your tablet is not on. Volunteering is up there. Spirituality is also up there. So these are some things that we can consider for ourselves. So I'm going to leave you with an activity. This is something that I learned when I was an instructor at Humber College. And I can't remember who taught me this, but essentially after the first class of every semester, after I taught the class, I would get the class to pull out a blank piece of paper, and I would get them to section it off in 3 portions. And I asked them to write down stop, start, and continue. And what I said to the students were, okay, this has been your first day with me. I want you to write down, based on day 1, things that you would like me to stop doing, maybe things that I'm doing that are annoying you, things that I want you to start doing. So is there something I haven't done yet that you'd like to see? And things that you have liked so far that you would like me to continue doing. So they would do this after day 1. I would take them home, I would read them, and try and make adjustments for the next class. And usually people are very honest. So what I'm going to suggest is that you do this for yourself. You can do this weekly, you can do this monthly, you can do this daily. You can ask yourself, okay, Tammy, I am going to stop looking at my phone every 5 seconds. I'm going to start putting my phone in my bedroom while I am working. I'm going to continue going for walks every day for at least a half an hour a day. And this keeps me on track. Okay? Any questions about that exercise? It's simple. You don't need to spend any money. All you need is a paper and a pen and a pencil. Before we go, I want you to remember that when we're talking about conflict of any sort, it can be resolved. It may not be able to be resolved this minute, but it can be resolved. I also want to remind you that conflict can be a good thing. Good things can come out of stressful situations, right? Usually when we are stressed out or experiencing conflict, there's learning that comes along with that. I also want you to remember that conflict doesn't always have to be long-term. All right, so before we end this session, I did promise that I'm going to leave you all with some mental health resources. So one of the positives for me that have come out through COVID is that there are more online free services. So I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to suggest that you get your phone out. I am going to record the session, or I have been, so you can access this through Christine. But if you want to take a picture with your cell phone of the screen, you can do that too, if you see anything that interests you. So the first two programs that I wanted to talk to you about are called Bounce Back and Together All. So Bounce Back is a course and a support that you can do online at the comfort of your own home and time. And it's CBT based. So we talked about cognitive behavioral therapy. So what happens here is you go online, you register, you are given an online coach, you are mailed workbooks, probably they're sending PDF now, and you are given access to online videos. So you watch videos, you speak to your coach, and you do exercises. This is free of charge. Together All is an anonymous peer support group. So this is a place where you can go to talk to other people. It's a safe space, and there are some self-guided courses that you'll be able to take, and again, free. If you have children or you work with youth, wheretostart.ca is a website that you can access other services for youth, for family. They offer groups, they offer workshops, they offer walk-in counseling. Right now, they're probably doing them on the phone, and they also have crisis services. Good to Talk is a service that is available to anyone who is in post-secondary. So again, if you have children who are in post-secondary right now, this is a free service. You can text, you can talk, and the numbers are listed here. Free to Talk is another service. Now they have specific dates that you can call. I will tell you that the people on the ends of these lines, they are therapists that have volunteered their time to do this, and this is run by Essence of Mind. I also want you to remember Kids Help Phone. They've been around forever, but they definitely have bumped up or ramped up their services. You can text, you can phone, you can do a live chat now. And for those of you who have never heard of the Canadian Mental Health Association, like I mentioned, I worked there for 11 years. You can visit cmha.ca and you can find your local branch. CMHA is national, it's across Canada, and they have local services, and all of their programs and services are free of charge. Last but not least, feel free to connect with me if you or an organization that you know is looking for a speaker. My coworker and colleague, Steve Lister, is on the line. He is also a facilitator, and we run workshops on conflict management, stress management, resilience, suicide intervention, mental health.
Mommy's going to be very gentle. Mommy will have a
So this is my email.
I promise you, it's not going to hurt. You don't have to cry. No, there's nothing
I'm
to
going
be
to
scared
ask
of.
that you mute yourself. All right. I actually missed that time. I have 4 teenagers in the house, and no one wants to hang out with me anymore. So I am on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. I post videos. I post things in relation to mental well-being and health. I am on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me. Thank you so much for having me. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this draw. I'm going to close this chat box, stop sharing,